Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, September 19th, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a 2020 Senate election video. So pretty much we're looking at the map and deciding which party will end up coming out on top following the November general election. So we have a number of competitive Senate races. I've actually gone ahead and filled in all of the safe states for the Democrats and the Republicans, and one thing you might notice is that there are a lot more toss-up Republican seats than Democratic seats. There are only 3 seats currently held by the Democrats. I have yet to fill in for them. First is the GOP. They have a total of 14 seats that are at least mildly competitive that are in contention this year. So when we're looking at this 17 toss-ups number, you have to realize that the Democratic Party, while they may come close in some of these races, probably has a very little chance of winning them. For example, Kansas, Barbara Boyer, the Democratic nominee, is expected to get around 45 to 46% of the vote, but she probably has less than a 10% chance at winning there. Why? It's a ruby red state, and even if a Democrat comes really close, they're going to hit a peak and not really have enough momentum to push them over the top. But this situation that's been unfolding in the past 48 hours, 24 hours actually, has completely changed the way we're looking at the United States Senate. So this will probably be the last regular Senate election prediction. This is based off a lot of the data that we've seen so far. And once all of the senators make an actual declarative statement as to how they proceed, how they plan on proceeding through with the potential SCOTUS nomination from President Trump, then we're going to get into the entire logistics of what that would look like for a Republican candidate or a Democratic candidate up in the United States Senate. Pretty much, once all of the senators have made their positions very clear, we can reanalyze the Senate map. But like I said, this will likely be the last map that seems normal in the best sense that it could. So we're looking at 17 toss-up races. Let's talk about the ones that are a little bit more conservative, or at least a little bit more Republican, and are a little bit likelier to go to the GOP this election. So as you can see across the entire South, practically every single state is a swing state. Taking out Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, the rest of the states are at least somewhat competitive. I wouldn't say Mississippi is going to be super close, but it's probably going to be less than 15%, which on my map means it's not considered safe. Looking at some of these other Democratic states where they're expected to get, upwards of 10 and 11% of a victory, they are going to win them by likely margins as well. So this likely margin goes anywhere from 5 to 15%. So it really doesn't matter. The margin, it's a win for the Republicans. It's a win for the Democrats. At the end of the day, this person will be in for 6 years with the exception of special elections. So for the GOP, they have a pretty strong grip on states like Mississippi. There's Cindy Hyde-Smith. If you recognize her name, it's because she was up back in 2018. She won a runoff election later in the year following the 2018 midterm elections. She won that by only 8% against Mike Espy, and guess who the Democratic nominee this election is? Mike Espy. So this state actually has the largest percent African-American population. So if we saw drastically increased turnout amongst the black population nationwide, we likely would see Mississippi narrow up on both the presidential level and the Senate level. But at the end of the day, these are Republican, voters across the state that will absolutely outweigh the decision of minority voters in this state. And overall, the Republican Party will remain victorious on both the Senate level and the presidential level here. As we look over in its somewhat neighboring Texas, I guess the general region, this is another state where I think that the Democratic Party is probably not going to have as good of a grip on as they did in 2018. Beto O'Rourke came within 2% of defeating Ted Cruz. And this was, sure, a Democratic wave year, but what we've seen is that this year is shaping up to be very similar to that. The generic ballot numbers are the exact same. The Republican Party is at a pretty bad position in both the House elections and the Senate elections. So when we're looking at some of these competitive races, it is unfortunate for the Democratic Party in Texas that they could not return to their 2018 numbers because Beto O'Rourke was way more competitive than MJ Hager. And Ted Cruz was a very well-known senator in that state. He was the runner-up in the 2016 Republican primary, now being considered for the Supreme Court. So Texas, Mississippi, likely Republican states. We have some other likely Republican states. I still think, even though Mitch McConnell has announced that he will be, putting forth a vote for the Supreme Court nomination, that Kentucky is still going to be a likely Republican state. People forget that these are still Trump voters. Just because they dislike Mitch McConnell doesn't mean that they dislike what he does. He's just been in for a very long period of time. Half a century, that long. And, Mitch McConnell probably won't be voted out this year. Amy McGrath has actually been one of the top Democrats in terms of fundraising, $45 million, but she's still underwater by 13-15% in the most recent data. Honestly, it's a lost cause for the Democrats and a waste of money. If I was to put it plainly, Kentucky should not be where the Democratic Party is targeting. it's a likely Republican state at this point. Moving over to Alaska, this is another state that I consider to be likely as well. Dan Sullivan is in for a mildly competitive race, but it's still Alaska. Again, ruby red state. Those undecided voters that, are pushing down Dan Sullivan down to 43%, tied with Al Gross at 43% as well. But again, these undecided voters will easily be breaking for the GOP, enough to put them over the top in this state. So that's another 6-year term for Dan Sullivan, 43 Senate seats for the Republicans, 44 for the Democrats. So you can see the GOP is narrowly inching up, but that's because I am focusing on GOP states at this point. Alabama, I think that, Doug Jones, regardless of his decision, it's going to come up short. Regardless of what he does, he's going to either push away solid Democratic base in Alabama, but you still push away some voters. Doug Jones is in a very difficult position at this point, being from one of the most conservative states in the nation as a Democrat. He wasn't elected in a general election year or a presidential election year. He was elected in a in a special election year, 2017. So it's going to be very difficult for Doug Jones to come out of this entire situation. And even generally, my last prediction had him losing by a likely margin. I'm going to stand by that. I don't think that he comes out victorious this election, unfortunately, for the Democratic Party. They're likely to lose their first senator in Alabama for the first time. I believe Doug Jones was the first Democrat elected in 25 years. In fact, the last Democrat elected is one of the current Republican incumbents, Richard Shelby. But Alabama goes to the Republican Party. So that puts them at 44. I'm still going to characterize Georgia's Senate special election as a likely state as well. Unfortunately for the Democratic Party, their name recognition there is close to none. Most people don't even know that there's a Democrat running in this special election, because we see Doug Collins and we see Kelly Loeffler top two time and time again. And this is a jungle primary. On election day, every single candidate will be on that ballot. And it looks like the top two contenders are Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler. The Democratic Party is not coalesced around one candidate, though they have one that is currently endorsed, Raphael Warnock. But right now, it looks like the GOP will come out on top. And if it's two Republicans, well, obviously that's going to end up being a safe Republican state. So these are actually my final likely states for this map. Let's move over to likely Democratic states. So I'm actually going to move down Minnesota to a likely Democratic state. I think that the Democratic Party will win this state very solidly, but I think that the percentage probably will be around 11, 12, 13%, not 15% or higher, which means it's no longer considered safe for the Democrats, but it still puts them up at 45. The next state that I would consider to be likely for the Democratic Party is Arizona. Mark Kelley is likely to easily defeat Martha McSally this election, and she's already said that she will be, essentially voting for Trump's nominee, and that the Senate should absolutely be voting for a Supreme Court replacement. And she said that on the night, last night, and her comments as an unelected senator from that state were very, very quick. And unfortunately for her, she's on track to handing the Democratic Party yet again another Senate seat. I can only imagine if she returns 2 years later. But for right now, Arizona is going to be a likely Democratic state. Mark Kelley is a fundraising beast at this point, and I can absolutely see the Democrats winning Arizona by a much larger margin than the presidential level. The next state is Michigan. This is another battleground state, but Gary Peters is doing relatively well. He's doing almost as well as Biden in this state, and that's actually a pretty high milestone. Biden's up 7-8% statewide. So Gary Peters is on track to win his election. I think that the margin will be greater than 5%. Especially if the election was held today. So Michigan, likely blue. Minnesota, likely blue. Arizona, likely blue. Arizona is actually a flip, by the way, if you didn't get that. Colorado is the next flip. This is another state where the Democratic Party will be expanding based off their 2018 numbers from 47 now up to 48, and they have way more to go. Not way more, but still a little bit to go. Colorado, the Democratic Party will easily win here. They're running John Hickenlooper. Cory Gardner votes with Trump, and his support 94% of the time from a state that didn't even elect Trump in 2016. So Colorado, this state is easily voting for John Hickenlooper, and we're likely to see it by a likely margin. I guess no pun intended. So 7 toss-up states remain, 45 Republican Senate seats, 48 Democratic Senate seats. So if you're looking at some of these states, it may be surprising to see South Carolina and Kansas grouped on the same level as North Carolina and Iowa and Maine as toss-up states. But then again, you're looking at a very weird election, and also candidates really do matter. If we're looking at the 2018 governor elections, well, take a look at Kansas, for example. Chris Kobach was such a bad Republican nominee that a Democrat won the Kansas governorship. Even in 2018, this state went to Trump in 2016 by 20%. Should not have been remotely competitive even in 2018, and it went to the Democratic Party. And Chris Kobach was actually the front runner before losing the Republican primary to Roger Marshall. While Roger Marshall is better, he's not drastically better. He's still boring. And Barbara Boyer is bringing fundraising numbers that no candidate has seen in Kansas in the entirety of the state's history. And it looks like, this race is shaping up to be insanely close. So while the Republicans hang at 45, the Democrats are at 48. Let's talk about some lean states. These are states that are considered to be within a 1 to 5% margin of victory or expected margin of victory for these either incumbents or challengers. And let's talk about the likely Republican states first. I think these are the ones that are going to put the GOP a little bit closer than before. So Kansas, I would say, is a lean Republican state. I think that the margin is going to be less than 5%. What we're going to see is Barbara Boyer probably get around maybe 46, 47% of the vote. And it's going to be pretty close. But at the end of the day, the Republicans are going to end up carrying Kansas. It's still Kansas, and Donald Trump being on that ballot will likely glide them to victory in this battleground state. But a lot of money is being poured in here, and we have 44 days until the November general election, so a lot can change, but not much will change because it is Kansas. It's not a state that the National Democrats are targeting super heavily, but again, it's within single digits at this point. It is possible that something does overturn in this race that makes it, move in favor of the Democratic Party. The next state to talk about is South Carolina. I think South Carolina is going to be, very, very close. I'm thinking this is a lean Republican state. A month ago, it was a likely Republican state, or 14 days ago. And 6 months ago, right at the beginning of the year, this state was considered safe for the GOP. Well, Jamie Harrison has shown us that he is a very, very good fundraiser, to say the least. He has fundraised a lot of money for this South Carolina Senate race, and a lot more now more than ever, because of the fact that Lindsey Graham made those comments in 2016, then repeating them in 2018, repeating them time and time again as he's been a senator from this state, that he would not vote to confirm, or the Republican Party should not submit a Supreme Court replacement in an election year after the primaries have already started. But now, today, he goes back on that statement and says, that's different. That's not what I meant. This election year is weird. The circumstances are different, making a number of excuses as to why he isn't following through with the original situation that he outlined. And he did say, if Trump is president in 2020 and there is a vacancy in the Supreme Court, that they would not put forth a nominee. They should not vote for that nominee. And he said, quote, "I want you to use my words against me." He said that in 2016 and then again in 2018. So when asked the question yet again, well, he doubled down on it. And now it looks like he's moving back on that. And that is something that's already going to hurt him, because before, RBG unfortunately passing away, he was still tied with Jamie Harrison. Him going back on this promise is going to be something that is actually going to hurt his campaign. And while I don't think he's going to lose, I think the election is going to narrow up absolutely. So that puts the Republicans at 47. How did they get to 51? And the reason why I'm saying 51 is because Donald Trump is not too likely to win the presidency. Joe Biden is the favorite at this point, which means the Democratic Party only needs 2 out of the remaining 5 toss-up races. And they get 2 of them. They get it from North Carolina, and they get it from Maine. North Carolina goes to Cal Cunningham, and Maine goes to Sarah Gideon. So actually, looking at Maine and North Carolina, they're expected to be one of the closer races, these 2 closest races on the Senate level this election year. Sarah Gideon is running a very strong campaign against Susan Collins, but Susan Collins is going to have a little bit of trouble maneuvering with what's happening with the potential SCOTUS replacement, because let's say the Republicans do pass it, or do confirm this. Supposedly it's supposed to be Amy Barrett. We don't know right now, but let's say the Republican Party does confirm Trump's replacement Supreme Court pick. Susan Collins saying, I wouldn't vote for it, or I'm not going to, and voting against it really won't mean much if nothing was actually accomplished. And even if she is one of the 4 that denies the Republican Party from seating a Supreme Court nominee, it's still going to seem as if, you're trying to make up for your Kavanaugh vote. And I think when she voted for Brett Kavanaugh, it really solidified her loss in terms of her re-election bid. And it's going to be very difficult for me to see how she can maneuver handling the Trump vote and holding on to that right-wing vote that very well could just leave the Senate election blank in Maine. I mean, Trump's support has dwindled in that state. But there is still a significant portion of those voters that will feel betrayed if they don't already, because she is a bipartisan senator in a sense, or she used to be at least. The comments that she's been making now seem to be very Trump-esque. She's been in support, saying, "Oh, I'm just disappointed in the Trump administration, or I'm concerned," but not actually doing anything, is what the Democratic Party has been hammering on her for the past couple of months. And even if she does somehow block a nomination, it's just going to seem like a futile effort to win back these Democratic voters. But let's say she votes for the nominee and they do get on the Supreme Court, it's going to be even worse. But either way, she doesn't end up victorious. I still think Sarah Gideon is the favorite to win this Senate race. As for North Carolina, Kel Cunningham is running against Tom Tillis. Tom Tillis' numbers are very bad for someone that's entering into the final stretch of the election. He's still in the low 40s. Still in the low 40s as an incumbent Republican. And yes, those undecided voters in North Carolina are likely to break for the GOP, maybe 60 to 40. But still, the fact that an incumbent Republican senator is still around 42, 43% in terms of data, and Cal Cunningham is at 48, 49%, he doesn't need too much of the undecided vote in order to win the election. And we're probably going to see a lot higher turnout than what we saw in 2016, especially amongst the minority population, which will likely lead Democrats to a victory in North Carolina, possibly even on the presidential level. So North Carolina going to Cal Cunningham at this point. Sarah Gideon wins in Maine. That puts the Democrats at 50, which means they win the they win the Senate. They win the Senate majority, because if Biden is to win the election, the incumbent vice president's party does end up in the majority. And in this case, it would be the Democrats, because Kamala Harris is a registered Democrat, and then Chuck Schumer, assuming he is chosen as the majority leader, moves over, and the Democratic Party would be the current majority holders. But there's one seat that I do think I'm going to change its characterization from my past video 2 weeks ago. I think that the Democratic Party will end up victorious, not in Montana, not in Georgia, but in Iowa. I think that the Democratic Party will narrowly win this Senate race. I know this one's been moving back and forth. Teresa Greenfield, I think this is my first prediction in a while where I've actually put her over the top, over Joni Ernst, because Joni Ernst is also going to have a very difficult time navigating this situation. Because yes, Iowa did vote for Trump in 2016 by a pretty solid margin. Then 2018 rolls around and they flip-flop. And what we've seen from Iowa voters is that they are very interesting, to say the least. I mean, they voted for Obama very solidly in both of his elections and then moved over to Donald Trump in 2016. And now it looks like it's shaping up to be a pretty close race yet again. And the Senate level, even closer. But I think Teresa Greenfield, if the election was held today, with the energy that the Democrats have, raising $69 million since last night, we're seeing a lot more energy on the Democratic Party side than what we saw yesterday morning. And I think the Democratic Party will ride that into the election, because we are a month and a half away. We're 44 days until the November general election. And I think Iowa, if the election was held today, would go to Teresa Greenfield. But I think that in Montana and Georgia, I do think that the Republican Party will still end up victorious. I think Montana will be insanely close. Steve Bullock is going to come within a very, very close margin in this state. Regardless of who wins, Steve is going to end up winning and move on to the United States Senate, either being reelected as a Republican or a new Steve coming in. But right now, Steve Bullock is at a pretty strong position in the state. I don't think he's going to end up victorious. In Georgia, David Perdue is likely to hold on to this race. John Ossoff's numbers are running a tad bit under Vice President Biden's, but let's say if Biden has a very phenomenal election performance and he wins Georgia or comes super, super close, it is possible Ossoff, gets even closer and possibly even wins. But right now, the data is indicating that as long as Trump is leading, David Perdue is also leading, but by a larger margin. So it's going to take a lot for Ossoff to end up winning in Georgia, and the Georgia Senate special election is practically gone for the Democrats at this point. But, the only flip that we've seen from my previous prediction to now is Iowa, but a lot of race rating changes in some key battleground states. So final map, 51 for the Democrats. They no longer need Vice President Kamala Harris if Biden is elected. 51 Democrats to 49 Republicans. 0 toss-up races. I left in this, yellow characterization for certain states, but I've decided to not use it. I'm going to characterize all of the states. We have probably maybe 3 more Senate election predictions before we actually get the final results. So I think that's insane, but, we'll get there. So 51 Democratic seats, 49 Republican seats. That's how I see the map as it stands today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. On the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. And then on the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 Senate election videos. This includes, coverage and predictions from the past. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.